GoPro Studio tips and tricks. My name is Meredith and I'm the GoPro mom, and I have been showing you how to use GoPro Studio, the free software for Mac and PC to edit your family movies. This is going to be a short little video on some tips and tricks for using GoPro Studio. So in part one of this series, we went through a little bit of an overview of GoPro Studio. I showed you how to import, how to change some of your settings, and then convert, and then add to your timeline, and then export your movie. And that was part one, the intro to GoPro Studio. In part two, we talked about editing multiple clips. I put together a movie of 45 clips from vacation from one day at Hershey Park, and I showed you how to trim those clips so you can get rid of all the junk parts, the blurry stuff, and just, the parts that you just wanted to get rid of. And then in part three, I showed you how to add music and transitions and titles to your movie to make it just a little more interesting and a little more watchable. And then last week in part four, I showed you real quick how to create a time lapse in GoPro Studio, which is really, really easy, especially if you shot the time lapse on your GoPro. GoPro Studio makes it really easy to create a time lapse, and they're really fun to do, and they look really cool. This week we are talking about tips and tricks, which is basically like all the other stuff that you can do in GoPro Studio. So I am opening up my movie that I created a couple weeks ago when we were talking about adding transitions and titles and music. So this is our vacation from Hershey Park. And I still have all the clips in here. It's the same exact project, basically how I left it. And I want to talk a little bit about these settings here over on the right-hand side. GoPro Studio will adjust a ton of things for you automatically, and usually for the most part you don't really have to change anything, and they make it really easy in that way. If you wanted to change them though, you absolutely could. One of the things you might want to do is your framing. So down here under framing, you have your zoom. Now depending on how you set your resolution for shooting on your GoPro, you might have a lot of room where you could actually zoom in on your clip without losing a lot of quality, to the clip. So I actually, most of the time I shoot my videos in 1080, so I don't have the ability to zoom in because I really like to have those smaller file sizes. So I shoot in 1080 so that I don't have to worry about running out of room on my card just to have some big, huge, massive movie, because most of the time I don't come in here and crop and zoom and all that stuff. But if you wanted to do that, you absolutely could. And how you would do that is just make sure that your clip is selected. We're on this little sky view ride here, and myself and my youngest daughter are sitting here with the GoPro, and my husband and my oldest daughter right behind us. So if I wanted to zoom in on them, come down here to framing and just literally move the slider and it will zoom. When you do zoom in, you can change, if you zoomed in a little bit, you might want to, maybe move. Whoop, that's pretty far. But you can, so you move things around. You have a horizontal and you have vertical. And it looks like you can also rotate a little bit if your camera was a little bit crooked. So I need to move these back because I'm not obviously going to create my movie like that. And then what you can do under image is you can adjust exposure, contrast, saturation, and sharpness, which are typical things if you've ever used Photoshop or anything like that. You can adjust these things similar to how you would do it in Photoshop. But GoPro Studio does do all that stuff for you automatically. White balance you probably won't have to mess with. Again, it does it for you automatically, and the camera itself does this stuff automatically. And then when you put it into GoPro Studio does its thing automatically also. So the thing with the GoPro is pretty much like everything is automatic. So unless you're doing something fancy, or if your footage just doesn't look right to you, or you just really want to fix it, then feel free to adjust your white balance and your exposure, contrast, saturation, and sharpness, as you see fit. Usually I don't do that with any of my movies that are in GoPro Studio. But let's talk about slow motion a little bit. I already added some slow motion to one of these slide videos. I think it was right here. So I want to show you how I did it. So what we had here was my kids were coming down the slide with my husband. And so everything is on, regular speed right now. And the playhead gets to here, and then it slows down. And then when it gets to here, it picks back up. So what this is doing is using GoPro Studio's flux option. And so if I click on this is the clip here that is slowed down to slow motion, and it has flux over here with a check mark there. You definitely need to make sure that you're using at least GoPro Studio 2.5 because I think that's when they added flux in. So if you don't see that option there when you go to slow your clip down, then you might need to update your software. So basically what Flux is doing, kind of adding frames in between your frames so that your slow motion doesn't look choppy. So I don't have a whole lot of footage here that I can, really slow down, but I want to show you what I did with that one to break it up a little bit, because it was all one clip and then I broke it apart and slowed down the middle. So let's slow down. So let's see what this one looks like. Maybe we can slow that down. I don't know. It didn't look very interesting. There isn't really a good spot to slow. All right, so this one would be good. I can slow this down here. So this little yellow bar here, this is called the playhead. So what I want to do is right before that water hits my daughter's face, right there, that's where I want the slow motion to start. So my playhead is right here, and I'm going to come over right near where we do our marking in and our marking end points. Right here, there's a razor blade. And that is, if I click that, it's going to split my clip into two. And so this is the first little part. And then right before the water comes down is when it splits into the next clip. So after it hit her face, like I guess maybe right there would be a good place to stop that. I'm going to split it again. So I have one clip, I split it into 3 parts, and this middle part here is the one that I want to slow down right when that water is basically hitting her face. So I'm going to come over here on the right hand side. I'm going to slow this down to, we'll just put it somewhere around 25. Flux is enabled, and let me back up a little bit here and we'll see what happens. So, it just it kind of enhances the video a little bit. When you don't do a lot of extreme things like myself and my family, then there isn't really a whole lot of stuff that you can slow down. So if you have stuff to slow down, great. If not, then it's really no big deal. Now if I wanted to do the opposite and maybe speed something up a little bit, I suppose we could do that over here, maybe when we're on the Ferris wheel. Let's just speed it up. I don't know, 300%, 250. So okay, so we're on the Ferris wheel, and wow, that makes me dizzy just looking at it spinning around like that. So yeah, you can speed it up, you can slow it down, and flux will work with both of those things. Basically, you can just think of flux as it just smooths things out. One thing to keep in mind is only use flux if you really need it. It takes a lot of sort of brain power for your computer to do all of that interpolation. So when it comes time to export your movie, it has a lot more work to do. Like you just created a whole lot more work for it to do when you enable flux. So that's why I guess, sometimes I see videos and they just have like one tiny little portion is slowed down and then it speeds up again, which is really cool to watch those types of videos, because it just kind of enhances the experience. And so you wouldn't want to watch an entire video in slow motion. That wouldn't make any sense, and it would take forever to export. So use it sparingly and use it wisely, and you should be all set. So one last tip that I want to give you is at the end of your movie, just make sure that you end it really nicely and it doesn't just drop off and the music just all of a sudden stops. So you can do that by having your music fade out. So this one here is selected. This one called For All You Know is selected. And I had already set that to fade in, and I just also set it to fade out as well. And then when you select your video clip, you come up here to video, and just go to fade out as well. That one was at somewhere around 408. So we'll do the same thing there, and we'll see what that looks like. So we're on top of the Ferris wheel, and we should start fading out here any minute. So it doesn't have to be fancy, just kind of end it so that it doesn't feel like you just dropped off of a cliff, just end it nicely and kind of calmly if you want. And you can always add a title screen at the end if you want. Just give yourself credit for creating the movie or giving the music credit for being in the movie, or whatever you want to do there. Feel free to do that at the end as well. So that's all I have for tips and tricks. I haven't obviously covered every tip or trick or everything the GoPro Studio can do. This is really one big sort of overview to get you started in using GoPro Studio, not really how to master the program. In next week's video, which will be number 6 in the series, which is the last video, we're going to talk about exporting your video so that you can use it wherever you want to use it, whether you want to save it on your computer, archive it on an external hard drive, upload it to Facebook or YouTube, or whatever you want to do with it. We're going to go over the exporting process to make sure that you aren't saving it as some big huge file size, and you can do whatever you want with it. If you want to learn more about creating home movies that people will actually watch, hop on over to GoProMom.com, give me your email address, and I will send you an email every week with more tips and tricks just like this. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you.
GoProMom.com